Hello everyone, I'm Angela Ha from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. The following panel section is a fascinating one, which is going to explore the career opportunities of technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship in finance. Ever since the fintech revolution, companies are stepping in and using technology to do things better, faster, and cheaper. Yet, it's just the beginning. New startups are emerging every day. I guess all of us have been waiting the panel for long. May I now introduce the speaker to you. And before that, let's give a big round of applause to invite the panelists on stage. First, we have Mr. Duncan Chiu, President of Hong Kong Information Technology Joint Council and Managing Director of Radiant Venture Capital. Possessing 20 years of M&A and investment experience in the Greater China region, Mr. Chiu founded the Radiant Venture Capital in 2014, serving as the angel investor in the tech startups. By now, there are more than 30 investees spreading across the mainland China, the United States, Israel, and Hong Kong. Mr. Chiu is keen to promote entrepreneurial culture through both high-level strategic discussions with experts and youth business acumen empowerment. Next, we have Mr. Henry Ma, Vice President and Chief Information Officer of WeBank. Having lived and worked in Silicon Valley for more than 10 years, serving as the General Manager at Ping An Technology Company Limited and as the Vice President at SF Express, Mr. Ma has completed IT integration and constructed management system for many well-known enterprises. As the senior management in WeBank now, Mr. Ma oversees the strategic planning and development of fintech businesses. Last but not least, we have Mr. Simon Leung, founder and CEO of WeLab, Asia's leading fintech company which operates 我来贷, one of the largest mobile lending platforms in China, and WeLand, a leading online platform in Hong Kong. Mr. Leung founded WeLab after working in the banking industry for 15 years, reinventing traditional financial services by creating seamless mobile lending experience. He was awarded Silicon Dragon's Entrepreneurial Achievement Award in 2014 and CEO of the Year in 2016. May I now invite Mr. Joe Knight to kickstart the panel discussion.
Great. So we're here, the next panel. This is the young panel, the up-and-coming panel, right? So as opposed to the last panel, all of these guys' companies have been around for less than a tenth of the time that Jackie Chan spent at AIA, right? So basically, their companies are all a few years old, but growing very quickly, right? So I think that we have a very different, side of the financial service sector, right? So what I thought I would do is I'll ask each one of you to maybe give a bit of an intro around what you're doing or what your company is doing, right? And how, maybe a little bit of how you got into it, right? And then we'll start from there because I think that we're much less familiar with your company as opposed to HSBC, AIA, Credit Suisse, right? So maybe Duncan, we'll start with you.
Okay, so since we have so many students with us, I think we'd rather go into how I get into what I'm doing rather than talk to you about what I'm doing actually. So I echo a lot, I enjoy Bernard's speech a lot. I think I have a lot of experience that would echo what he feels. I came from I came from a private family in Hong Kong. I had no choice. I mean, when I came out from school, back in '96, I graduated from school. I got a phone call from my father and said, okay, pack your bag and you come back and work for the family. So I saved the decision-making process of about, whether you should go into work for someone and work for the family. I had no choice, actually. So '96, I came back to Hong Kong, and if I had Facebook by then, probably most of my friends would unfriend me because they all think that I have the best job. I work for my family. It's a listed company. I become a director. And we have investments in multiple countries. But in fact, it's not. I think it was one of the most difficult jobs at the time that I had in '96. It was a listed company in Hong Kong, 800 million market cap. We have investments in many different countries and in many different sectors. We have an amusement park in Singapore. We have a cement factory in Suzhou. We had a baby clothing manufacturer in some other parts in the Jiangsu area. And we have some securities holdings and some theaters in Hong Kong, a golf course in Malaysia. It's so random that we have a bunch of investment within the company. But the main point is most of the holdings, most of the investments that we have at the time were money losing. So as a young man, just graduate from college and stepping into a company with such fast investments and they're all losing money without management experience, I think that was the toughest job I had. And the thing is, I was the youngest in the family. My father was 50 when I was born. So we have a board comprised of a large amount of family members. So being the youngest in the family, I have no choice, right? But take orders. So after a few years in the company, then running some money-losing business and have no chance of making some changes to that, I tell my father in '99 that okay, I want to quit. I want to work somewhere. So my father said, okay, stay put with what we have now. And, the company have some money, go invest into something. So at that time, the company has around 20 million Hong Kong dollar. For a listed company in '99, it's not a lot of money. And the company is losing money. So we had to figure out how to pay checks to the other employees at the time. So the only capital that we have, I start investing into tech. In '99, I can tell you that I was so smart that I think tech is going to be a big trend in the future, but it's not. I figure out that from now that the reason I do that is that that's the only thing that our family hasn't invested into at that time. Tech is the only thing that we haven't invested into. The whole family member, every one of us, haven't invested into anything into tech, and I wasn't educated in tech. So I think China has a broad market. I invested all the capital that we have at the time into several tech companies. And let's, just go back to what Bernard said. I think just do best with what the resources you have. I spent a lot of time in Beijing in the companies that we invested, roll up my sleeve, be part of the team, build a company, and then blah, blah, blah in 10 years. So with the investments that we made, the 20 million that we have at the time, we sort of exit all our portfolios in 2011. And with that investment at the time that I have, we made 20, 30 times from that, and it became 400, 500 million Hong Kong. It's not a lot, but I mean, it lets the company runs and the company survive. So then 5 years ago, I was approaching 40, and I talked to my family and my father. They say, it's about time for me to quit, right? I have made enough contribution to the company, and I want to pursue what I want to do. So then 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I quit the family business, and 3 years ago, I found Radiant Venture Capital, that we start investing into tech companies globally. We think it's still going to be the engine for the next generation growth. We want to look at company with research background early, and we want to bring them to China with a network. So for the last 3 years, we have done over 30 investments globally, about 1/3 in Israel, 1/3 in North America, and 1/3 in China and Hong Kong. We still think that's the right direction. And I think going back to the story, I had no choice, but at the time, it was actually quite lucky to have that resources. But I mean, just do best with whatever resources you have, and you'll figure out. I'll never figure out I'll be into tech, when I graduate from school. So just, try it out what you have with your resources, and you find a way.
Great. That's a great story. Did you invest in WeBank or WeLab?
Unfortunately, I'm still pursuing the opportunity.
So you get missed out here. So Henry, why don't you tell us a little bit more about WeBank and what you guys are doing?
Okay. Can I get a quick poll from the audience? How many of you have heard about WeBank from before? Can I have a show of hands? Okay. Not that many, huh? Yeah, because we are still young, right? We are a very different category of bank, or very different category of financial services. We don't have any branch. We don't have any tellers. So everything is being delivered online. When we started the company, 3 years ago, we started in 2014. At that point, we were actually thinking about what kind of a bank that we want to build. There are already more than 3,000 banks in China. We don't need another big bank. So Tencent, being one of our major shareholders, we realized we are very privileged to be able to get access to two very prominent social networking platforms, WeChat, QQ. And also they have a very abundant supply of data. And on top of that, the technology infrastructure of Tencent is also very strong. So we decided to build a bank, a totally new bank from a piece of white paper, and then try to leverage as much of the latest internet technologies as possible. So we don't envision ourselves to be a big bank. In fact, we try to leverage technology to be able to make ourselves the best connecting platform in the industry. On one hand, we try to connect with a lot of different internet platforms who have a rich set of data and also a huge user base. Look at WeChat or QQ. I mean, we are talking about hundreds of millions of daily active users, right? But these are also the platforms who are also very anxious and eager to monetize on their data and user base, right? So they all want to get into the financial industry, but at the same time, they really lack the experience about financial industry, how to do risk management, how to package a financial product, right? On the other hand, we see a lot of traditional FIs. They have lots of capital, very rich supply of financial products, but in the internet era, they don't really know how to get in touch with their users. They really don't know how to get into access the alternative channels that are being available. So if WeBank can actually sit between these two different set of players and play our connecting role, and along the way, be able to leverage the technology capabilities, the risk management capabilities, the product design capabilities that we have, then we believe we have a high chance of being successful. And also, very importantly, we position ourselves to be able to actually fill a very important gap in the market, serving the micro enterprises and the general underbanked or even unbanked population. Since our inception 3 years ago, we have been slightly successful with our experience so far, being able to serve more than 30 million customers with only 1,200 people in the bank. And also, most of them being engineers or data scientists. So out of the 1,200 people, we're talking about having 600 to 700 engineers or data scientists. And the kind of technology areas that we have been focusing on, including AI, blockchain, cloud computing, big data. So we believe, to be successful in the fintech era, you have to be able to master these kind of very important technology pillars. So, for the rest of the session, we can probably explore a little bit more what we need to do. But I myself, I'm an engineer by training, so I still consider myself a technical architect so far. And so how do I get into the financial industry? I think coincidence and also being able to grab the right opportunity at the right time. Okay.
Great. So thank you, Henry. That's great. And I'm very glad that we have James and Joseph here because they are the Gokjeong and Fugokjeong here and we just issued going to have the license for the digital bank in Hong Kong, right? So WeBank, 2 years old, 30 million customers already, and branchless, right? So that's a little bit where hopefully, one day in Hong Kong we might have something to give HSBC a run for the money. So Simon, you're the entrepreneur here, right? You quit your job, you start your company, raise capital, and now you've built your company. Can you tell us a bit more around that journey, what you guys have done, and working for a big company versus working for yourself?
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me back again this year. My name is Simon. I'm the founder and CEO of WeLab. Probably a lot of you have never heard of WeLab. WeLab is a company that we founded 5 years ago in a very tiny office in Shanghai, above those Hoi Mei Po. And we grew that in the last 5 years from that 2 individuals, me and my co-founder, to now we have 4 offices in the world, 500 employees, 25 million users, and we were just awarded the fastest growing tech company in Hong Kong by Deloitte here 2 weeks ago. In the last 3 years, our revenue grew by 7,000%. Okay, so my story started off Before I go into my story, so we're in lending. We're in mobile lending, online lending. Because I'm a founder, I thought I'll tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing before I tell you my story. I think it's important to understand, as an entrepreneur, the motivation behind why you want to do something. Why do you want to leave a company, take zero salary, move to a tiny office, pretty smelly. You know those Hai Mei Po in Shanghai, it's very smelly, that area. Why do you want to do that, right? So I started my career in 97, 98 as a management trainee at Citibank. And I was with Citi for 12 years. And then in 2 years in Hong Kong, 6 years Singapore, 4 years Taiwan, and then I came back to Hong Kong in 2010. And I've always loved consumer lending. I believe that an efficient access to lending is a fundamental form of how the mass market consumers improve their lives. You think about it, from someone who has a new baby, who wants to move to a bigger house, to someone from someone in China who has a new job and need to buy a new motorcycle and to drive to work, or just simply taking your family out to vacation. So financial freedom transforms people's lives. But when I was looking upon how I was doing it in banks, I thought there were a lot of rooms for improvements. So we thought to ourselves, what could we do possibly to make that better without losing the elements of banking? Now, I'm not saying that banking or the way banks were lending money was completely bad. I think there were lots of areas in risk management, treasury, portfolio, where banks have actually accumulated decades of experiences, went through credit cycles, economic cycles. So the objective of coming up with WeLab was, how do we combine the best of the old and new? The best of the old was risk management, technology, treasury. The best of the new was big data analytics, mobile experience, and the other areas of technology which allow individuals to perform all financial transactions without meeting anyone face-to-face. Now let's think about it. Face-to-face is a very fundamental form of how financial services was originally given, right? There's a lot of reliance on meeting someone, checking the ID, asking that person a few questions, right? If we remove that interaction, we will remove that one single physical interaction with a digital interaction, and that digital interaction can give you thousands and thousands more data points. Do we have the technology, computing capability, and analytics to understand individuals better than that one single human interaction? The answer is obviously yes, right? Many more data points, and if you have the computing power and the technology, you can do so. So that's what we do. And we apply to lending initially in Hong Kong, and then in 2013, we moved to China in 2014. Now we run what we call B2C proprietary business. We use our brand to lend, and now we also moved to a second line of business where we license the technologies to lend, meaning we allow banks, especially in China, who are seeing like companies like us who are having their lunch, right? Because our fintech companies are growing so fast, we now give the technology to banks and allow them to go into mobile and internet and lending so that they can also embrace the fintech revolution.
Right. So we'll come back a little bit more towards the whole consumer lending in China, because certainly that's an area that is lots of opportunities, but also fraught with risk, right? And we'll come back a bit to that. But before we do that, I thought that it would be interesting to also go back a little bit to kind of what you think the future holds, right? Because I think that before we heard from the previous panelists, right, around the traditional finance, right, whether it's in commercial banking, investment banking, insurance, right? And obviously, they are growing as well, right? They are actually doing quite well in many ways, right? And if you think about the entire landscape of industries, right? If you look at any retailer right now, right? If they're not in online, they're pretty much dead, right? In retail, it's completely gone, right? But if you look at actually many banks right now, even though the digital thing is not very good, right? The digital bank is not quite there yet, not a lot of fintech, but they're still making a lot of money, right? It's a heavily regulated industry, right? Actually, customers don't leave just like that, not like retail, right? And in many ways, there are still a lot of believers, right, in the financial services that, hey, you guys talk about fintech, but up till today, right, the big banks, the big insurance companies, right, the big guys out there is still quite safe, right? So, Duncan, you invest a lot in fintech and also in technologies, right? What do you see is happening in the financial services, and what is the threat and opportunity from technology into the financial industry that you see? What are you investing in?
I think it's definitely getting there. I mean, I'm a firm believer of, like WeBank's model. So, I mean, if you get allocation, I can invest a bit. I'll be really glad. So, I think students here, I mean, people in the next generation, they'll definitely be okay, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, that everything, the numbers run in their mobile phone, if mobile phone is still there. And, they were happy with branchless banks and take care of all their money online. I think it's definitely getting there, and it's more efficient. You don't have to wait in line, and with the compliance, and when everything being monitored with big data. Of course, I think that big data is not fraud-proof. I mean, Henry can talk a bit about that, but I would say the business model is getting there. But the good thing is, opportunity is, I think. It would just happen gradually. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. So a lot of the banks today, I see they have to proactively, investing into fintech as well. And opportunity for Hong Kong is, I think we have the standard here, we have the compliance, we have the reputation. I think we can be the clearing center as well in the future, being what we call the fintech hub. I mean, 10 years down the road, we wouldn't call it fintech. It just happened, right? Just how it was still. It was just how it was transacted. But I think we still have that edge. So I quite like the thing that we see is in Hong Kong. We have a lot of fintech companies in Hong Kong, and I think they're quite promising, especially I think somewhere in the B2B area that they help bank efficiencies, and we gradually get there to a bankless bank. I firmly believe in that.
What are some of the trends that you are investing in or you're very optimistic about? I know you have looked into blockchain, you've looked into robo-advisory. What are the things that you think would be interesting, either for graduates to get into or for investors to invest into?
I like cybersecurity too, because I was just away in China last week, and someone sent an email to my financial controller and asking him, how much money you can transfer with my name. And the email account was actually just one letter different from my real email account number. I'm Duncan at radianvc.com, and it's just one letter different. And sending to my FC, so they know my FC, and they know who is my FC, and they know I was away from Hong Kong. So that's thanks to wrong use of big data analytic, and I think people just, with people that has access into my Facebook account, that happens, and it happened twice. So I have to go to report to the police. I think that's one big pain point when we are, progressing in tech. We have to tackle the cybersecurity issue, and that's one thing where I'm looking at, of course. But of course, I think B2B, bank efficiencies, RegTech, InsurTech, these are all big areas that we should look into. Yeah.
So Henry, you are competing in the world of fintech in China, yes, where there are probably 2,000 companies doing P2P lending. You're also competing in very big banks, right? ICBC every year they're spending $1 billion on IT alone, right? So how are you competing? How do you think? Now, obviously, you have Tencent and WeChat. That's not very fair. But how are you thinking around will happen, right, in China over time, right? As you guys try to get bigger, but at this stage you are, 1,000多亿资产, right? So it's you're tiny compared to like the big guys, right? So what's the future, right? Are you a real bank, or are you just going to be, a spin-off from Tencent that looks interesting but isn't going to be like a real impact on financial services?
We actually look at us as more like a licensed entity, but with very strong fintech capability. So in a way, we are more like a fintech firm with a banking license. The way I see it is that the financial industry, banking industry, there's still a lot of potential to be uncovered. Like just look at the products that we offer to the market. The microloan product that we issue out, like cumulative drawdown, like from the figures this May earlier this year, it's already 360 billion RMB, right? And other figures that I can share with you guys. Actually, half of those loans are being issued after 5 p.m., between 5 p.m. and the next day, open business. So we are not really replacing any existing business. We are actually trying to mine any unlocked potential in the market. And we see there's still a lot of potential in the market there. But in order to do that, you actually have to use a lot of leverage, a lot of technical capabilities. Like what I mentioned about AI, blockchain, cloud computing, and big data. That's what we call the ABCD strategy. Right. You talk about AI, we heavily rely on AI. We don't really have a huge customer service representative base. Right? Most of the inquiries from our customers are being answered by robots. On a busy day, we'll get over 1 million inquiries from our customers. 98% of them are being answered by robots. So there's no human intervention involved.
So don't get into call center. That's a bad business.
Yeah. Don't get into that place. Okay. Also, remote KYC. We don't have a teller, right? We don't have any branch. So how do you actually recognize our customer? How do we actually certify their identity? Facial recognition. No, it's not a myth. No, it's reality already. Technology is already doing a much better job than human beings in certain areas. For example, the facial recognition technology that we have, the error rate, the so-called false acceptance rate, is already far below 1 in a million. For human eyes, I mean, you can look at some public data. It's about 0.8%. So robots, machines are already doing a much better job than human beings. For these kind of areas, seriously, I mean, we should rely on machines to do that. And blockchain is another key area that we see a lot of potential as well. It's not just cryptocurrency. We are not a strong believer of public blockchain. We are not a strong believer of Bitcoin. But we see Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, as one of the many applications being supported by blockchain. Okay. We have the philosophy about the so-called distributed business model that we propose. Right now, a lot of the businesses are being dominated by big players. These big players, they outsource whatever they can do to other smaller companies. In the future, we believe corporates, small, medium-sized corporates, are going to be linked up by blockchain to form a distributed network. So each of them will contribute their values and be able to share the revenue, the profit generated out of that distributed business model. And that's what we have been focusing on. In fact, like the microloan business that we have, we don't do it all by ourselves. We work with a lot of banks in China. Right now, we link up to over 45 of the banks to do loan syndication. I mean, essentially, it's an idea being applied heavily on corporate lending before, but we use it on retail banking. For $1,000 RMB being borrowed by our customers, 200 RMB come from WeBank, and the rest actually come from our partner bank. And we share the risk together. So it's a loan syndication kind of approach, very similar in the corporate lending world. And we rely on blockchain to do clearing. So when a lot of people talk about blockchain, I mean, it's still lab projects that people are talking about. But at WeBank in China, we are already putting into production. Since we actually launched out this clearing platform in September last year, we have already more than 5 million transactions being recorded on blockchain. So it's not experiment anymore. It's not a lab project anymore. It's a reality. So I think in the future, for any players to be successful in the financial services industry, technology is definitely a key. So that's why I think it actually makes sense for even large organizations to start investing more resources into this area.
Great, fascinating. It's great being a moderator because you get to invite your friends up here and get to ask any questions you want, so that's great. So Simon, the question for you that I have is, it's notoriously difficult for Hong Kong companies to succeed in China, right? You guys started in Saigon, and now, in search for the market and customers, right, you now have probably a bigger business in China than you have in Hong Kong. How has that experience been, right? So you took our last chief executive, CY Leung's approach and go to China, right, and immerse yourself and do some business there. So how has it been? What are the challenges, as a Hong Kong company, right, executing in China? And maybe you can share some of that experience with our audience here.
Thank you. Yeah, that is actually a very interesting experience. So when we started off in Hong Kong, we did it for the first year. It was very successful, but we knew that if we wanted to be a billion-dollar company, we cannot be a Hong Kong-only company, because when you're in consumer internet market, the size of the population plays a huge part of it, right? So we said, okay, we need to explore the next market. And China was a very natural sort of answer for us, right? So I still remember the first time of us going in was literally just myself going there to Shenzhen every day, coming back for dinner, going there every day, right? I think one of the things that we realized was we have to go back to the theme, right? Combine the best of the old and new. I would probably say that if I were the head of our China business, it will be a failure today. I think what I realized, the best thing that I realized very, very early on is I have to hire a local to manage our China business. And I have to know how I could add value to my business. I added value through the technology. I added value through professionalism, my financial services background. They add the value through understanding local knowledge, know-how, connection, and network. So we combine our best of old and new. We combine the best of both worlds. So what we at the end did was very much different from how a bank usually run two businesses, right? We actually allow both countries to have their own local senior management team, and there is actually no holding company, no group office. We believe that for a fintech company to grow, for a fintech company to survive, in fact, the most important thing is speed. You have to grow extremely fast. And when you need speed, you don't need standardization. You need people to move extremely fast. So we allow the two companies to build their own technology, to grow as fast as possible, to have decisions made locally by locals on the ground every single day. And what we do as a group is knowledge, technology. This is what we actually transfer. How do we actually continue the vision of doing completely seamless mobile lending and allow it to apply in both markets? I think that was very, very important. And we did it, and it was extremely successful up until today. If you ask me, in my China office, we're 500 people. There are less than 5 of us from Hong Kong, meaning the other 495 of them are actually locals. Because we know that in order to do so, we have to be able to let go and empower the local markets to run as fast as possible. That's how we make it. And the next thing, what we're doing right now, interestingly, right, we are looking at how do we actually replicate this to the next market. So the next thing what we're doing right now is Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is another huge market, a very attractive a place for to solve the problem of financial inclusion with technology. Large market, young, mobile savvy. So now we look at how do we actually replicate similar models in order for us to expand extremely fast and enable local teams to do so. So I think that these are some of my own personal learning on it. And I still go up to China probably 2 to 3 days a week. And I still, as I promised to my wife, every day I come back for dinner.
Can I add on to that question? Because I think there's a wrong impression that a lot of people think Hong Kong company cannot do well in China. I think there's actually a lot of success story that, people just ignore. One of the companies that I built in China, Chinasoft, it was 150 people when I first invested in 99. It grew up to, I think they have around 50,000 employees now today, a 10 billion turnover company listed on the main board. And I think our CFO, COO, we're all from Hong Kong. And there are other companies like Xiaomi, DJI. There's a lot of companies that they have the root in Hong Kong. Now we have SenseTime, which is also a company coming out from Hong Kong University going to China. But it's the nature that, Hong Kong has only 7 million people. I think the market is only there. We should, I always say to startups in Hong Kong, we should follow the Israel model. Israel has 8 million people, very similar to Hong Kong. They are happy with grooming company from early stage to AB, Series AB, and then they push them out. Should go to America, should go to China, expand outside. They still call them Israeli company, right? Why should we think DJI is not Hong Kong company? They have Hong Kong element. We have to see what we have best in Hong Kong, groom the company in early stage, push them out. Go to China. If you do well in China, go to China. If you do well in US, go to US, and you still have the Hong Kong route. If they succeed, they make money, they come back and start a company, right? So I think I see a lot of Hong Kong story, but it's just that they've been left out.
Sorry, if I may add, I think one thing I missed out, right, is in the wild, wild west of China fintech. So you ask Henry, he'll know that in China fintech companies, you have the big one and the small one, and a lot of those that are pretty shady. So how do we differentiate ourselves? And one of the things that people like about us is we have our roots in Hong Kong. People knew that When you're in Hong Kong, one of the largest international financial centers in the world, when we tell people that we are very professional in risk management, we understand financial services, right? Our partners in China respect that. Our Chinese and partner respect that, knowing that these guys know what they're doing. These guys are very, very professional in what they do. I think that's a very core competitive advantage that we can bring to the Chinese market.
Yeah, I receive a lot of questions here, so keep them coming. But I don't want all to come from my voice, right? So maybe if, either you have asked a question here or you would like to raise your hand, right? Maybe we'll hear a little bit from the audience here. I'll leave the last question for James. But raise your hand if you want to ask a question, even if you have submitted a paper, because I would like to hear from you guys as well. Okay, so 2 here, 1 here, right? Can we just go?
Yeah, hello, my name is Cloud from UST, and I want to ask Mr. Mark. Mr. Mark mentioned that we have to rely on machine or some big data, some AI. So I'm asking that quantitative trading has been widely used in USA a few decades ago. So which would you prefer, automatic quantitative trading or human decision trading?
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Let's keep the questions. We'll come back to each one. Yes.
Hello, my name is Rainier from OUHK. I would like to ask, because there's the rise of Bitcoin, right? How does those like digital mining kind of affect the financial industry in a way? Like,
Okay, so Bitcoin and how that affects financial market. Great. One more here. Yes. Yeah, we'll hear one more question, then we'll go 3 in a row.
Hi, my name is Fiona from Hong Kong BU. My question is about how to prepare ourselves to face the challenge of the challenge and opportunities of fintech and entrepreneurship. Because for me, I'm a major is accounting. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not very analytical science. So how do I prepare myself to face the challenge of fintech? Thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll just take them as they come. So Henry will go first, and then or anyone, right? Bitcoin, right? Quant trading versus human touch, and how to prepare ourselves.
Okay. Maybe I'll start first. I'll take the last question first. I think that's the easiest to answer because in terms of like fintech, I mean, we are not just talking about tech, right? So it's not just an engineer who can actually change the financial world. You still need the financial side of the input, right? So for any non-engineering background, non-technical background, just keep track of what the latest trend is, understand technology, be open about it, embrace new technologies. I think that's the right attitude to take because, like, at the end of the day, it's not just financial. You still have to be aware of the fact that later on you need to combine technology to really make the industry better, make your job more secure.
Henry, more concretely, she studies accounting. She wants to work for WeBank. She gives you her resume. What does she write on it?
Hang out with our engineers. Find a boyfriend who having like an IT background and learn the language. That's very important because it's not until you learn the language, right, that you can actually begin to master it, take control of that, right? So, and the question about Bitcoin, right? I'm not a strong believer of Bitcoin, although I still believe its value is going to skyrocket down the road because there are just way too many criminal activities who try to stay anonymous and leveraging the Bitcoin infrastructure. But I'm also a strong believer of cryptocurrency. But it has to be government-based, right? Fiat currency has to be the backbone for cryptocurrency. That's why PBOC, the Central Bank of China, is also very active in working on the cryptocurrency solution. I think that's the way to go. And about quantitative trading, sorry, I'm not an expert in this space, but yeah, maybe the other speaker.
I don't have, on the last question regarding accounting major, I don't have anything substantially more intelligent than what Henry had, except for one thing, I'm also accounting major. I think accounting is a very fundamental form of how business, allow you to understand the business. I think with that, it's actually going to give you a lot of good background on how that actually would apply to running your own business and understanding how like revenue expenses get recognized. And later on, you can build great businesses, fintech ones, by the way, build on it.
Duncan, are you investing in Bitcoin?
On the three questions, I mean, just get to the first question on machine versus human. I think that will replace some part of, some human element, but I think definitely human touch will always be there. I mean, AI can beat people on, AlphaGo can beat us on chess and other things, but I don't think AI in any near future can create an Einstein, right? Something with cell automation in many other areas. So that's one thing. Question 2 on Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is going to be, it will stay there as a commodity. As long as people think something has value and is close-end number of that, limited number of that, just like a flash card. There's a SIM card, anything, if you think it's value, it's a value, right? But it wouldn't replace cash and money. It's just going to be some part of a commodity, something you can trade. But I'm big on blockchain. It's a great tool. And I'm big on Ethereum. I think Ethereum has more function than Bitcoin rather than, just as a currency. And the third question about on the job thing, I think you have to be cross-disciplinary trained in this world today. I mean, fintech means you have to understand finance and you have to understand technology. So you have to equip yourself in more than one profession today. Just an example I will always want to share is we have invested into a company in States that there's a bunch of tech people, and they started a company that writes will, for people. And will, in the US is really complicated. 52 states have 32 different laws and regulations and wills. So if you're born in California, work in New York, and you pass away in Florida, you need to engage a lawyer from 3 states, and it's going to take a lot of money. It's never going to work. So there's a company that we did, and what they do simply is that they just run through AI with all the state laws and come up with a simple will for people for a few $100s. And that will with the pace that they're growing, they will replace maybe all the lawyers that are doing wills in the States. And I mean, if you're just trained by one profession, what I mean is you could be right out if you're just doing wills day in and day out. So be cross-disciplinary trained.
Great. We can hear another, maybe two questions or so. Yes, one here and one there. Okay, good. Let's do 2 more, right? And then I have 1 or 2 here, and then it's James.
Hi, I'm Usman, a year 1 student from CUHK. So in a world full of thousands, if not millions of startups, how can someone new to the field distinguish themselves? So in regards to the thought process that you put into your work, which form of incentive do you think would be the most useful? Financial, social, or moral, etc. Thank you.
Okay, so when about startup? There's one more question here, yes. Yep.
So my name is Yoshi, I'm from PolyU, and my first question is, as we know, there are more and more companies eyeing finance. For example, the Chinese e-commerce giants, JD and Alibaba, they all have launched their own small loan programs and also credit systems for merchants and customers. And their unique advantage can be that they have very massive online transaction database. But on the other hand, there are even more some companies like specialize in manufacturing, like Foxconn, who make iPhones for Apple, and Volkswagen, who make cars. And they have also launched their financial service companies to provide loans for their suppliers. So their unique advantage can be that no one else knows better about their suppliers than they do. So I wonder, like, compared to these competitors, what kind of unique advantage would you think WeBank have that would enable you to thrive in this more and more competitive market? And my second question is, just to refer to what you previously said, that WeBank actually has no physical branches. So which are actually the main channels that these traditional banks draw in funds from? And on the other hand, because it mainly targets at these millennials who are very familiar with the internet, so it kind of loses the older group. So I wonder, like, would that really be a concern for WeBank to beat these traditional banks and win its marketing position? Yeah.
Great. Mervyn, I think you should hire her in your research department. She's already studying. James, maybe you want to say hello to us and your question as well.
Yeah. I'm James Lau, Secretary for Financial Services in the Treasury. My question is for each of the speaker. When our government, we are now very keen to actually devote ourselves to fintech development in Hong Kong. Can you cite one or two problems, areas, or particular issues that you think the Hong Kong government should really address as a matter of priority? And if you can also care to suggest how to go about it, so that then we can really sort of escalate ourselves to the next echelon. Thank you.
All right, so with a bunch of things, we have a couple of questions for Henry, for you, and then I think that also we have kind of broader also around, also for Hong Kong as well, right, which I think is something that's very dear to every one of us, right, and this is a good opportunity for us to discuss that too. Henry.
Okay, I'll take the question from the lady about WeBank. Well, first of all, like the lending business, the way that we look at it, data is the most critical element of doing the next generation banking products. Because that's how you understand your customers. It's not just by the form that they submit to your bank, right? It's really understanding the day-to-day behavior of your customers, that you actually form an opinion on their credit profile. And that's exactly how WeBank do our business. We work with a lot of partners. We work with people like Tencent. We work with these used car platforms. They have very rich data sets about their user portfolio, right? Understanding their user behavior. And our modeling people, we actually work with them.
So maybe, Henry, give us an example of one factor that you guys possess, right? Either information or data that traditional banks do not, that actually is quite helpful in assessing the credit quality.
Okay. Like, just take an example of the microloan that we actually launched in the Chinese market. We work with WeChat and QQ, right? And I'm just required to say one particular factor, right? So, for example, Red Pocket in China is very popular, right? So, as long as you are the person who issue Red Pockets to other people, which means you actually have a stable source of income. Otherwise, you couldn't really issue out the Red Pockets, right? So that's actually a very strong indication of your financial income situation. And we use that as a very important parameter to determine your credit profile. And this is only one of the many examples. Like, we also look at your stability. We don't ever look into your contents of your conversation, but we actually look at your, for example, your friend circle. Are they stable? Did you actually have a very abrupt change of your social circle? That's a very good indication of your current situation as well. And that's how we use to determine how much credit line that we can actually issue to you.
Great. There's a question also on startups, right? How do you differentiate yourself and how do you stand out, right? So, Simon, you've been fundraising forever, right? So, when you first started and even now, right? How do you make the pitch? How do you stand out, right, in order to attract investments?
Yeah. So I think number one is pick your industries, right? Pick your industries means try not to pick an industry where it's winner take all. It's very hard to be in a winner-take-all industry when you're not the first one or the biggest, right? So when we go to our investors, right, what we talk to them is specifically in what we do, right? I think there's something called business model innovation, which is more P2P lending. Business model innovation it's most likely a winner-take-all market, right? So it's very hard to create differentiation in a business model innovation like P2P when you're not the largest or the first, right? But there are things that is not winner-take-all, and there are things that actually allow you to create differentiation. For example, technological innovations. Technological innovations actually allow you to create differentiation, and it's not winner-take-all in a lot of these. So when we actually created the business, right, we actually focus, instead of doing P2P, we don't do P2P. We actually focus on how do we build technology to enable better risk management. So that actually allows us to have a much stronger story when we can prove that with R&D, the success of the data and stuff like that. So I think that's number one. Number two is, I obviously get asked that question a lot by new investors. But we always remind them that Facebook is not the first social network. Google is not the first search. Apple is not the first smartphone manufacturer. They won by being good at execution.
Duncan, you want to talk about entrepreneurship, but then I think we want to get back to James' question
Yeah, I think I
also
want to get back
around
to James.
Hong Kong.
I think one simple answer to that is for us, we fund, so we have investors. We have to look for financial returns. So that's the number one thing definitely we have to look at. But I want to really get back to James' questions. That I mean, thanks to James, we were just in London last month, leading a fintech delegation to UK. And I think now, if you ask me as an investor, I think now is the best time for Hong Kong, 天時地利人和, to expand our network and foundation in fintech. There's a lot to do, but definitely there's something that China can do and Hong Kong cannot do. Like in the disruptive area, B2C area, China's policy of letting company to explore first and then they set up regulation later. I think there's no way we can compete to that model, but there's definitely a lot we can do in B2B area. We can be the standardization platform, like what Simon said, when he went into China, I mean, as a Hong Kong company, it adds value, that people have trust in Hong Kong operator, especially when you're trading money, capital. The reputation issue is something we'll have to build on. But definitely, I would say we have to come out with ways to attract talents. That's number one thing that we have to figure out, how to let these people, like UK, we were being asked every people we meet in UK, they were saying that, how do you think about Brexit, right? I think it's definitely something that is really, really hindering the development over there. And as the first country to embrace fintech, I see a lot of startups over there having problem because the money issue, they raise funds from Europe, and now they have to tackle with that. And there's a lot of talent out there. We need to bring them in. I mean, our financial market in the 80s, we blossomed because we bring in talents globally. And with the startup, with fintech, the same thing. How do we attract all this talent here, and then they can cultivate and let students we have here to be our second-tier professionals. So things that we can come up as a government to set our standards. There are some things I think Hong Kong can do, like what I mentioned, cybersecurity. Foreign companies will have no way, penetrating into China market and setting up their cybersecurity team. A lot of Israeli company I know I talk to, they are good, but there's no way they can go into China because and you're going to go into China market, the number one thing you have to open your source code. No one going to do that. But we can be the standard in Hong Kong. We can build the standardization area in the region and let's say cybersecurity. And we can be a regional leader. It's just one example I want to raise that I see big opportunity. If Hong Kong raise the flag, we want to be a cybersecurity center. I think it's doable and attract all the talent, globally. Come in and work on this, and we build a standard. We have the financing here. We have the capital for you, and we have new talents coming in, and I think that's at least one field we can work on.
Henry, you've been in China for a while, right?
Yeah.
So for Hong Kong, right? What should we do?
Yeah, I'm very much in line with Duncan. I think human capital is the key for success in fintech, right? So how do you actually attract and even retain the talents that you have in Hong Kong? I think is the key. Like, frankly, even at WeBank, we are stealing a lot of the talents from Hong Kong to Shenzhen, right? Because a lot of the graduates, when we talk to them, like, why are you interested in going to China to work? I mean, well, first of all, the market is bigger there, but I think more importantly, a lot of them, even for some of the students who are actually from mainland China, when they come to Hong Kong for higher education, they like Hong Kong. They really want to stay in Hong Kong, but there are not that many opportunities for them to actually develop their career, especially in the technology field, right? So that's why, like, after they graduated, they decided to go back to China. So I think, like, down the road, there is actually quite a major opportunity for Hong Kong to really try to capture. It's like a lot of the very successful players in China, they're thinking about going international, right? I think Hong Kong need to figure out a way to make sure that when these companies think about going abroad, Hong Kong should be their first stop. Not Singapore, not other places, right? And how do we do that? I think that's a very important question to answer. And also I want to raise another key area that I think from a banking perspective, because banking is a highly regulated industry, and I think rightly so, right? And for the foreseeable future, it will remain highly regulated as well. But fintech is moving so fast. At the same time, RegTech, regulation technology, is lagging behind. I think there's a lot of potential about regulation technology. And for this particular piece, I think the government really need to make a major investment in this area because otherwise, fintech will be skyrocketing, but the associated risk will also go uncontrolled, unmitigated, right? So, in order to really grow in a more healthy manner, I think RegTech need to be the coupling technology to go along with fintech. For this particular issue, I think really the government has to take the lead.
Right. Okay, so RegTech, so maybe we need to do something on that one. Yes, Simon.
So yeah, hi James. So I think the two things that I have in mind, from a fintech startup perspective, I think obviously the regulators have made great improvements in terms of creating regulatory sandboxes to test new areas of laws, right, or regulations, right? I think, but a lot of the times when we interact with startups, I think these sandboxes are more applied to licensed entities. So when startups want to test something, they don't know how to test it. They don't know where to test it, and they are obviously, they understand the Hong Kong regulators are obviously have a good control or ensure the stability of the market, right? I think that's the first thing, right, from a startup perspective. I think the second one, I also help certain industry groups on this. I think one of the things that larger institutions come to us, they ask for technology from us as well, right, is EKYC. In areas of EKYC, they're asking us, like, what are we doing in China? How can we do this? But sometimes after we have introduced them technologies that we have, right, they also worry whether it is something that, even if they can statistically and mathematically prove that it works, whether it is something that the regulation today allows, right? So it is not about technologies not being available today. It's more about whether it can be implemented in the current settings.
Yeah, I think we're going to wrap up soon, but I want to do a little bit of a poll, right? So for all the students out there right now, how many of you are how many of you are actually in the market for a job, right? Last year, graduates. How many of you? Whoa, then what? Okay, so the rest of you are first-year students? Is that right? Well, how many first-year students? Okay, so most of you are second year? Oh, okay, so it's a good spread. Wow, my God, you're overachievers. You're here already, first year. Okay, so because I think one of the key things which I want to go back to a bit earlier, the question to Bernie, right, which is a question around as you go into your career, right, and I think this is a very serious one, right? Am I looking for HSBC management trainee program? Am I looking for Standard Chartered? Am I going to put on a big brand, big company, on my resume, right, as my first job? Or am I going to go for, WeBank when WeBank was just starting, right? Now WeBank has, a little bit of a brand, but a big brand. But I think, that's a key question, right? I want to come back a bit to that because I think it is quite important. I think that the skill set, the experience, the entire way how your career may evolve, right, is completely different, right? Depends on whether that first job is actually a position in the big bank or whether it's not. Now, obviously, over time, it may change, right? So Simon came from Standard Chartered. Henry used to be at a much bigger financial institution called Ping An, which obviously is one of the big giants in China. Not that Tencent is small, but and certainly Duncan has always been a little bit on the entrepreneurial, right? But I want to come back a bit to that because I think it's very important. It's very important for you guys, right, as you go out there to look for a job. So the question to you guys, right, is around as our graduates go out there and look for a career, okay? What would you recommend, right? Should they be looking for that stable brand name, resume building job, right? Or they should be looking for these startups, their own, working for you guys, right? How would you think about it if they were your kids, right? How would you recommend if they were them, right? The accounting major, other people, right? How would you think about it? What are criteria, and how would you advise them to make that decision? Duncan.
I don't think there's a set answer. I always regret never work in a big corporation, so I would learn the system and compliance and stuff. But there are people that always work in a big company and telling me that they so regret they never start a business, right? So it's all about how you feel about what you want to be and whether what you want to be. So I would always, you know, in fintech, I mean, there's so many areas of, if you want to start a company, there's so many different business sectors. But I mean, if you go for a B2C, I look at a lot of startup business models. But I mean, if you're going for a B2C model, I would say you rather start early and go to the right market, China, US, and this is where people can have possibility of being success. And if you want to be, you know, you can also start a company in B2B and do well, right? You can do RegTech and insurance tech. But if you want to do that kind of thing, you have to have the domain knowledge. So I was just, for that kind of startup, you know, people, they have to work in some big corporation, getting to know what finance is before they start a company. So I think I wouldn't give a fixed answer on that.
Right. It's actually very difficult to give a fixed answer because I think at the end of the day, really, you have to find your passion, right? Because this is something that you have to live with for the next 20, 30 years, right, at least, before you can retire. So better find something that you are passionate about. And also, one very important criteria, hang out with the right people, right? You find the right people, whether it's a big company or a startup, then you just stick with them. Right. Stick with the team, build your business with the team, build your experience with the team, then ultimately, I think you will find your success.
Hang out with your engineers, right?
Of course, yeah. We have a lot of them. Single.
Simon.
So I think if I were to give an advice, right, I think about this, right. I think I would still advise someone to work for a large company at the beginning. It's their first job. Learn the system, learn how things work, how to manage people and stuff like that. I think it's immensely important. I think that's number one. It will be useful for the rest of your life, irrespective of whether you stay within the company or you go and start your own company in the future. Number two is when you plan your career, think about breadth and depth. Breadth is where you can get exposed to many different areas. Depth is going very deep into one, right? Think about breadth and depth. So meaning you can join a large company, but position yourself or go into areas that allow you to see a lot of different things, instead of just see one thing very, very deep. And the last piece of advice is, in fact, I just advised someone the same thing yesterday, right? The decision that you make at your 20s has probably extremely low bearing on where you will end up. Okay, so don't think too much, just enjoy yourself. Expose as much as possible. There's something called quarter life crisis. You should read up on that one. You want to learn how to get out of that. So, I mean, whatever decision you make has a little bit of bearing, but actually you have a very long and fruitful career ahead of you. So don't overthink. Yeah.
You know, I just saw that Paul is here. I would like to ask. There was a question earlier around AI, quantitative trading can replace, active, fund managers like yourself. So do you want to maybe have an answer around that one? So I want to introduce you to one of our FSDC members here.
Okay. Everyone, I think this is really a big challenge, I think, for fund managers. But I think, as you know, a lot of famous fund managers like the Renaissance Technology, they long ago, they start in 1983 with the fintech. They start the high-frequency trading using about 200 PhD, from IT and maths only, no engineering and all this. So actually, you can see that without engineering and all this, you can also develop fintech or other industry. But for us, I think in future, for value investing, I think we face a challenge because all the data, you can have the big data like from the accounting, or the PE and all this, you can have, and they can make the decision. Using the big data, they can make the decision faster and also more disciplined than human being like us, because we have the feeling and all this. Sometimes we can make wrong decision, or sometimes we are tired and all this. But for them, they are not. So I think in future, unless you are the best of the best, otherwise, I think you will replace. Yeah. So for us, also there is a challenge.
So I guess your answer is basically, you're active. You still be around. You will still be around. Okay, that's great. Actually, I want to also introduce Christoph here, right? So Christoph actually chairs the FSDC FinTech group, and we just had a report. So maybe you can talk a little bit around also some of the findings that we had around for Hong Kong. What do we look at? What are areas that we want to think about Hong Kong? Right? So I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to have our students understand what we're doing on the research.
Thank you, Joe. It's my honor to be here. I'll be very brief. We have a FinTech report that came out in May. You can download that from our website. And I think what we say echoes many of the points made earlier. Hong Kong as an international financial center has a lot of the ingredients to make us into a really leading FinTech hub. The opportunities we identify are mainly in the B2B area, right? Because it's obvious, Hong Kong is a small place, 7 million. To really grow a business, you want to go B2B. Very similar to what Simon has done, right? Maybe starting with a B2C angle, but very quickly changing into a B2B model. So there were 5 areas that we identified. I won't go through all of them. One of them, Duncan has already mentioned, cybersecurity. There's a really good opportunity for Hong Kong to be a leader in this space. There's no real standard per se, and we can leverage our status as being part of China to get into China, but also having what Simon has mentioned, you know, this professionalism, right? This long history and experience in risk management, right? In understanding how financial institutions work to be our strength. I would say, you know, James, Joseph, the government has done a lot of work to really make the FinTech ecosystem much more vibrant. Just a few weeks ago, all the regulators, SFC, Hong Kong MA, and the Insurance Authority has announced a sandbox for startups. I think in my working memory, this is the first time that all 3 regulators have made an announcement on the same day. So I think this speaks to the government's commitment to building the FinTech ecosystem in Hong Kong. The last thing I'll mention is there is a Hong Kong FinTech Week next week. There is actually a discount code that we got. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't know if the Secretariat has but we can offer discounts to those of you who want to attend. I think the best way to experience FinTech is to go to these conferences where there's a lot of content from established company like the WeBanks of the world to the startups. It's a whole week event, Monday to Friday. So I encourage you to attend that. Apart from that, there are many events organized by various incubators that I think is a good way to get exposure. So I'll leave it at that. So great to meet you all. I'll hang around. If you have questions, I'm happy to take them after our gathering. Thank you.
Great, and I'm reminded by everyone that the chief executive is coming soon, so we have to get off the stage. But when we close, I think that today, you know, I thought that there were a number of questions that were actually excellent, right? So we will do we all actually prepared a book, right, that we'll give to you guys, right? But we'll do it after the chief executive speech, right? So I think there were 4 of you who answered all my questions, you know, very, very well in the beginning, right? So there are 4 of you. I thought the question on the KYC, right, and all the, you know, is the HSBC MT program worth going to? I thought it was an excellent question. I thought the question on the WeBank business model, I thought that was also an excellent question. So for you guys, stick around. I think that we have lots of books here for you guys that each one handpicked by us, right? So we'll, you know, give that out later. And also, you know, lots of us are actually around here, and so I'd love to chat more. But we have to come to a close. Thank you very much for all of our panelists here. Let's give them a big hand.
Thank you very much to all the panelists today for your insightful sharings, as well as the guest sharing on the fintech industry. And may I now pass the mic back to Alphys.
Okay, so because the chief executive is not yet, you know, on the elevator, so we can give out the prizes now. Okay, so for the 4 of you who answered all the questions up front, can you come up? We'll have a little gift for you. Excellent. So we have 4 books here. Well, you'll be a little bit random. But I do want to advertise my book. Okay, so the book that I picked here is, Clay Christensen. It's a professor at Harvard Business School, and the title is called "How Will You Measure Your Life?" I think when you're choosing your career, I think what you want to do, it's a pretty good book to get grounded on. Great. And Anita's book is 強風吹拂。可唔可以介紹下呢本書點解要揀？
呢本書我諗你哋好多書都係講，there's a lot of books that basically talk about leadership, communication, technical thing. So I'm not going to introduce one of those books. This book basically is from a Japanese writer, 三浦子苑. And this is a book that she used 6 years to write. And talking about a almost 100 years long tradition in Japan, and every year during the New Year they will have a race. It's called the 雙根比賽係跑步嘅. So it's like a run, but then it's in the university area in Canton. So there will be like more than 10 teams being selected. And then these students will compete. And this is talking about there was one year that a particular team was amassed together, and these 10 individuals was actually from different nationalities, and they absolutely know nothing about running. So the coach essentially had to use 1 year to train them up. During that year, essentially each of them would have their own specialty. This is not about just to win. It's the process. And then subsequently, there was interview about some of the kind of best long runs, and runners in the world. And then some of the coaches were saying that when they pick the best runner, they normally don't pick the fastest. They pick those basically who have the strongest kind of will and endurance. Because the process in life is a lifelong journey. You have to enjoy the process. It's not just about to win. But I think this book is very good because it can resonate a lot in terms of the banking industry. The most enjoyable thing about any career, one of them is also working with people. So I do think that it's good to, some of you ask me about trading. They want to be a prop trader, they just want to stay at home. I said one thing that you miss is you miss having with people. And also in crisis, you work together, and those are the most memorable times that you have. That will be the biggest endowment. So I like this book. And also it has a beautiful kind of cover. Yeah, so.
Thank you. Okay, and then we can do 2 more, right? So to the person who actually had that, for the few wonderful questions that you asked, right? Can you come up quickly so we'll take a picture and give you a book? You know who you are, right? So there was, yes, please, do now. Yes. Chaos. Whose book is this? Excellent. Duncan, you want to?
Okay, thanks. So this book actually made a big impact to me on when I was still in high school, I think before I get into college. So I think all of you heard about butterfly effect, right? I think that was big at that time when it was, I think 16, 17, when the thing was first raised, that, butterfly flying in South Latin America is the reason that we have a hurricane, let's say in Asia, right? So at that time, I think there was a big theory that, sort of like if you line up everything in the world, then you sort of can predict the future. It's fascinating for a student at that time, for me. But I think what it come out today, why it is important, because butterfly effect is promoting non-linear thinking. It's actually not 0 and 1. So what we have now, machine learning, quantum, is actually all non-linear. So coming back from that theory 20 years ago, it's actually laid the foundation for a lot of the development, globally in terms of technology. So I think nonlinear is still going to be a big topic that machine learning, all stuff are based on. So this book is about it. Thank you.
Okay, and the next one, I think is over there somewhere, right? So there was a question. Yes, please. Quick. Banking 3.0. Who's that? Okay, Henry. So while they're taking pictures, Henry, do you want to explain?
Sure. The book was actually being published at the end of 2012, and basically we got a lot of inspiration from the book when we started WeBank. So if you guys are interested in what WeBank is actually doing, read the book.
Bank 3.0. Great. Take a picture.